Think back to a summer when you were 7 years old. It felt endless. June alone felt like a season of its own. Now think about last summer. It's already gone, folded into a blur you can barely separate from the year before it. Something is happening to time itself, not out there in the world, in here, inside your skull. And the strange part is, it's not slowing down as you age, it's speeding up. Why would the exact same 24 hours feel completely different depending on how many of them you've already lived? You've probably noticed it without ever asking why. Childhood summers stretched on forever. Adult years vanish in what feels like weeks. Most people just shrug and call it nostalgia, but neuroscientists have spent decades proving this isn't a feeling. It's a measurable distortion in how your brain builds the experience of time. And once you understand the mechanism, you'll never experience a normal afternoon the same way again. Here's the first clue. Time as you experience it is not a clock. It's a construction. Your brain doesn't have a stopwatch running in the background. It builds your sense of duration after the fact using one strange ingredient: how much new information it had to process. Psychologist William James noticed this over a century ago. He observed that a period stuffed with new impressions feels longer while it's happening, and even longer in memory than an empty period of the same length. A single unfamiliar day in a foreign city can feel like a week. A single familiar day at your desk can vanish without a trace. This is the first piece of the puzzle. Your brain doesn't measure time in seconds. It measures time in memories. Now here's the reframe. When you were a child, almost everything was new. Your first day of school, your first bicycle, the first time you tasted something you hated. Every hour was packed with fresh data your brain had never encountered before. So your brain laid down memory after memory after memory, densely, like footprints in wet cement. Later, when you look back, all that density gets read as length. That's why a childhood summer feels like it lasted forever. It didn't last longer in seconds. It was simply recorded in far more detail. Now think about your adult life. You wake up, you take the same route to work, you eat familiar food, you scroll through familiar apps. Your brain has already built a model for almost everything you encounter, so it stops bothering to encode it in detail. Why store a memory of a commute that looks exactly like yesterday's commute? Your brain quietly skips it, and a year built from 1,000 unremarkable, unencoded days compresses down to almost nothing when you try to recall it later. This alone would be enough to explain the effect. But there's a second mechanism, and it's even stranger. Psychologist Robert Ornstein ran experiments showing that people asked to judge how long an interval felt consistently based their answer not on a clock, but on how much information they had just processed. More information in a given stretch of time made that stretch feel longer, both during the experience and in memory afterward. Ornstein's work suggested something unsettling. Your entire sense of duration is a kind of illusion built from data density, not from any true internal clock at all. Then there's the proportional theory, sometimes called the logarithmic model of time perception, popularized by the French philosopher Paul Janet in the 19th century. Janet proposed something deceptively simple. A single year to a 5-year-old is 1/5 of their entire conscious life. That's an enormous fraction. It feels vast because it genuinely represents a huge percentage of everything the child has ever known. But to a 50-year-old, 1 year is only 1/50th of a life already lived. The same 365 days, a completely different proportion of lived experience. Your brain isn't measuring the year against a clock. It's unconsciously measuring the year against everything that came before it. And that math changes every single year you're alive. Put those two mechanisms together and you get the full picture. Novelty shapes how densely a period gets encoded. Proportion shapes how large that period feels relative to your whole life so far. Childhood is novelty dense and proportionally massive. Adulthood is novelty sparse and proportionally tiny. No wonder the gap feels so extreme. But here's the twist that changes everything you just learned. If time feels fast because your brain stopped encoding new information, then time is not actually fixed at all. It's editable. Neuroscientist David Eagleman ran an experiment where he had volunteers experience real freefall, dropping from a platform into a safety net while wearing a device that measured how fast they perceived a flickering display during the fall. Fear didn't actually speed up their perception in the moment the way people assumed, but afterward, when recalling the fall, subjects consistently overestimated how long it had lasted. Their brains had packed the terrifying, unfamiliar seconds of freefall with so much dense sensory data that in memory those seconds swelled far beyond their true length. A few seconds of falling became, in the mind, something that felt nearly twice as long. This means the fastest feeling years of your adult life aren't a life sentence. They're a symptom of routine, and routine is reversible. Here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. The years that feel like they vanish are not random. They are precisely the years where you stopped trying new things, where you stopped changing your route, your habits, your questions. Your brain isn't punishing you for aging. It's reporting, with brutal accuracy, exactly how much of your life you actually paid attention to. So what does this mean for you right now today? It means the version of your life that gets stored, remembered, replayed at the end is built entirely out of the moments your brain considered different enough to bother keeping. Most adults, without realizing it, spend years running the same loop, same commute, same meals, same conversations, and their brain quite reasonably files almost none of it. Not because those years didn't matter, because nothing in them was different enough to remember. You've felt this already, probably more than once. A short trip to somewhere unfamiliar, 5 days long, that somehow feels like it contained more life than the 3 unremarkable months before it. That is not a coincidence, and it is not sentimentality. That is your brain telling you, in the clearest language it has, exactly what a year made of nothing but noticing would feel like. Which brings us back to that endless childhood summer. It wasn't longer because you were young. It was longer because you were paying attention to almost everything, for the simple reason that almost everything was new. You don't need to become a child again to get that back. You need your brain to start encoding again. Novelty is not about vacations or extremes. It's about breaking the pattern often enough that your mind has no choice but to notice and remember and keep. Tonight, when you go home, you'll probably take the same route you always take, but you don't have to.